The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
There you go.
Double pour, it was in stereo. Yeah. At least in real life. I don't know if it caught both of them.
And a very good morning in Sonoma. Beautiful day. And we've got, wow. Brian Casey, Bart Hansen, Sam Couturi, and Kia. Welcome. Kia, your last name, Behnia?
That's
perfect.
Right. Perfect.
Neotempo. We're missing Tracy today and Tony Biaggi and Phil Couturi, but maybe Phil will show up.
We're making a cameo, at least one of those people.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, welcome to Sonoma this morning. Everybody, welcome to the Winemakers. I'm John Myers. So
I have been looking into this wine for, last 6 months or something, kind of intrigued by the Instagram account. And then I don't know if I mentioned it to you or Phil one day when I was like, hey, have you ever seen this wine? He's like, yeah, I've seen this wine.
I make this wine.
I work on it.
I grow this wine.
Yeah. So I'm excited because there's a lot of different paths we can go down with this, but hopefully, Kayla, let's just start with the beginning with who you are and how you came into the wine industry.
And thanks for coming over.
It's a pleasure. First of all, it's an honor. I'm a huge fan of your work and love what you guys do in terms of
work.
I know work. It's a good gig. That's the way I think of it.
Well, so different work pays usually.
Yeah,
so.
Right. So
and that's so that doubles up on me like work.
So let me start by saying, like many of your guests, or many of the guests that you've had on before, I spent some time at Davis and UC Davis, but unlike almost all of them, I didn't have the pleasure to be in the viticulture and enology. In fact, I took a wine 101 class and thankfully dropped it when I realized that they wanted to the students to be able to make out what they were drinking. So I was a computer science major in the early 90s before it was anything more than an engineering course, and had the privilege after that of working in Silicon Valley and being kind of upfront on a lot of the tech revolution that happened. Worked in a number of startups and kind of saw the change and kind of going through this startup to larger company mindset. I did that about 4 times. Always loved wine. I kind of grew up with Napa and Sonoma in the early 90s, kind of dust bowls between towns and not all the fancy stuff that it's become today. And always had a dream that one day we could kind of do our own story and have follow the footsteps of many who kind of create a second chapter here. I got a flat tire on Silverado Trail one day. Those days I thought the safest way to go and taste would be on a bicycle. It just shows you how different the world is now. So trail was pretty safe in those days. Got a flat tire in front of this beautiful property that had a small little, knoll. On a knoll there was a little house engulfed by these oak trees, and fell in love with that site. And always I would come back, and when I met my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I pointed that house to her, and it's like a dream. The house came on the market 15 years later, and that's kind of like I had to follow through with the dream. And when we bought the property in 2011, we knew the vineyard was not in good shape. They had, and again, I don't want to make anybody's fault, but they did the wrong rootstock and the wrong clones. And honestly, that made it very attractive to us because it allowed us to literally pull everything out, bring in, some of the best people to kind of help advise us on what to do, what grows best, what's the best way to go. And we were very sensitive towards the fact that a lot of people who do this as a vanity project kind of, come in, hire a team, don't really kind of understand what they're doing and create these somewhat soulless projects. And we didn't want to do that. We actually hated it. We love wine. We love family owned projects that, we have a lot of respect for the tradition of the industry, even though as I get into Neotempo, it's all about, being a little bit different. It comes from a place of love and respect and understanding that everybody who came here contributed, maybe by doing some things differently, but acknowledging that most of what we've done is right, particularly around the quality side. So we spent a year geeking out literally on rootstocks and clones. The easiest thing in the world would have been to copy and paste, what Tokalan has or all the great vineyards and just say, hey, I want those and I'm going to plant it in this area. We decided to, have fun with it. We went with 3 clones that at the time had just come into out of quarantine, FPS clones, by the way, French clones. And that's very ironic because we talk a lot about a sense of place and, what's us. But we were driven by wanting to create something that was unique right from the start. The site was unique. Those 120, 80 to 120-year-old oaks have seen that valley change. So it kind of created that mindset of connecting us to the past. But then we felt obligated by many of the wines that had moved us, inspired by those pioneers who created those brands, to do something that's different. And we were okay if it didn't work out.
Those clones, the thing about just because they're from France, they're whatever the notes on them are from when they grow in France.
Yeah.
When you plant them, at that spot with the Flat Tire Ranch, that's what you should really call it. Flat Tire Ranch.
I love it.
They're gonna do something different, entirely differently, right? I mean, that's kind of the point.
And that's the point.
They're nobody knows yet. Yeah. Nobody knew when you put it in the ground and grafted it over what it was going to do when it got
Sam, like you and your dad, I'm hugely moved and inspired by music. And there's limited number of chords, limited number of notes, but there's a reason why Keith Richard plays his guitar out of tune, because he doesn't want to make it easy for himself or for other people to copy him.
That's right.
And so there's a ton of variety. If you were to look at all the decisions that we all can make, from picking the site to the rootstock to the farming practice, I've actually put this on a chart. It's about 200 decisions that you can make.
Yeah, the variables are unlimited.
Variables.
Yeah. I always liken it to like a roadmap.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can get from A to B multiple ways, and depending on what you decide, it'll never be the same.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the weather, that's the site, that's the space, that's your decisions that you make. And I mean,
and
200.
There's no right or wrong.
No,
it's just that what works for you.
Right.
And can you find a tribe? And we knew back then that small is what we wanted. I have zero interest, neither does Tracy, in creating a massive corporate wine brand that has so many different brands underneath it. I just, God bless them. Been there, done that in tech. I think it kind of, we love maximizing smaller sites and sites that have character and a little bit of that unknown, underperforming kind of areas, because those were what attracted us in those days. And I just keep going back to what attracted us to wine was not the brands you could get everywhere. No. It was the little nook and crannies that you'd find, and you still can find. No. So we're very much motivated by that. The clones were just so I can kind of complete that, was 412, 338, and 685, all Cabernet Sauvignon. It's interesting because the area that we were at was known for Merlot back in the day. And I hate the freaking movie Sideways, if I can publicly say
that's
that.
Okay.
Because it killed one of my favorite varietals from a business standpoint.
And Sam,
I'm bullish on Merlot, by the way.
I'm hugely
I think that Merlot is poised for a comeback.
I completely agree.
It's good.
I completely agree.
To your point, it would be interesting to see what these clones did, where they were taken from, and compare the wine.
Do you have something from
whatever
state they came from?
It's actually interesting. I went back to Bordeaux looking for that because I traced it back to the nursery, and they are different. And I think I've heard a lot of people who are much smarter than me and much more experienced talk about the value of clonal versus soil and terroir. And honestly, they're all right. Any of these combos makes the wine different. Now, they're second cousins of each other. There are elements that you definitely can pick up especially if you know. But what we love is freshness that some of these varieties gave us, acidity, something that, again, I feel we get in European palates. And, and again, part of trying to be different is, in some ways just going back, back to the way it was in the 90s. So.
Before Robert Parker showed up on scene.
Yeah, and I liked a lot of those wines too. So I can't, and many of them are friends, but I'm saying it doesn't, what you hate is the 20th wine that is predictable and it's the same. The first 5 were pioneers. The first 10 were pioneers.
Well, not to Parker takes the blame for that. It's the wineries who thought they knew the way to get to the Parker palate. And if you really went through the greatest hits of the Parker reviews, they're wines that actually have character and reasons to stand out of the crowd. Right. Everybody, they also happen to be turbocharged. Yeah. If you go, so just thinking that it was the turbocharge was the way to get there completely missed the point. So,
I love your analogy of it though. It's, the first ones were great, and it's everybody after that just decided to copy
Copycat.
The dragon.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
They had the spot. They had the clone. They had the rootstock, and they had the winemaking to back it up. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
To
make that work.
And as we know, there are consulting winemakers behind the scene who kind of know what Robert's looking for, Bob's looking for. But I think the idea of not doing, so we promised, Tracy and I, when we started this project, we says we don't do cover wines. We love cover songs. We don't like cover wines. And I think that's kind of been the motto since the beginning. Cheers. And
what's your taste in music, by the way?
I love, so that's the other thing at Davis. I was at a radio. So basically we went from the computer labs in the basement to the radio station. So I love everything from reggae, dub, electronic music, rock, classic rock, indie. I used to be a buyer for a record shop. That's in fact how Tony Biaggi and I first met 30 years ago.
Oh wow, you guys knew each other for a long time.
Well,
before anything.
Yeah, before anything. And it was funny because the first time we connected on this project when we were starting to kind of talk to folks, because and I'll back up and explain the connection here, was he sent me a text saying, is this Kia from CD Research? And CD Research was this legendary CD only shop at Davis in the 90s that I worked at. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you saved me from poison. And I said, you were Poison? He said, no, the band Poison. Because I introduced him to Primus and Nirvana and a bunch of other ones.
Can we take I could totally see Tony getting into
some
Poison.
butt rock.
Well, I'll just stop and say Tony Biaggi by far has one of the best tastes in music, broadest tastes in music.
Now he does.
Thanks to you, Kia.
No, not thanks to me. He's legit. He impresses me honestly with tracks. So we have a lot of fun.
Can we also take a second to how brilliant of a name CD Research was for the UC Davis record store that you can be like,
absolutely.
You're like, son, how come you spent $300 at CD? Dad, it was for research. It was CD Research. It was for my research class.
Yeah, that was like one of the funnest jobs, almost like you guys have, because we got to listen to a lot of music as a part of our work, as a part of our research to see what would sell. And this is what opened my eyes towards, if you have preconceptions about something, you end up missing out on a whole bunch of stuff that's a lot of fun. And this is why I encourage everybody in our business, and also kind of other folks that are our buyers, love what you love, but then try other things as well, because you may find things that you think you don't.
And interesting aside for that, who is it from Metallica who lives up the hill near you? Is that Kirk Hammett? I've never really even heard Metallica, and it's like heavy metal, and it's just not Me. So we were watching this Elton John tribute the other night, and they did Funeral for a Friend.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube.
Metallica did?
Metallica, and
Amazing.
it is absolutely
They killed it.
unbelievable. They
killed
own the
Yeah.
song
Yeah.
totally, completely. That's theirs. So watch it.
I'll check it
it's
out.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Can I just say something real quick? It just struck me as I look at your bottle and your label. If you were a winery that wanted to grow and wanted to be on the shelves of wine shops, the whole thing is getting someone to reach for that bottle and pick it up.
Yeah.
And that bottle and that label does that. So,
But Bart, there's
Thank
even
you for
more to the story
I'm
that we're
sure
going to
there
hear
is.
about.
It's not that bottle is not just about
what's
grabbability.
transferred.
No, but
Not just a
I can
pretty
tell that
face.
already.
It
I
is
can tell that already.
imminently grabbable.
Yeah.
So Bart, thank you for that. And you've observed every time somebody says that, it just lights me up because the bottle and in fact our brand has its roots. I talked about the genesis of the vineyard, but we were growing fruit and selling fruit very happily to amazing wineries and winemakers. You know,
We're your
Elias.
neighbors, or Dariush.
Yeah, so Elias from Schaefer was our first customer and big advocate, and he's still a mentor to me to this day. He helped us really think through the clones because he also had seen them. He had some of them. He had some awareness around it. And then, of course, Dariush being neighbors, it made sense for us to, and I've been a huge fan of his project in the early days. Again, this is part of being kind of new on the scene and being kind of being different. And nobody can argue that Dariush was different when from the visitor center to everything that they've done around hospitality, etc. But 2017 happened. The fire came right to the edges of our vineyard. We were evacuated. We were lucky enough to have the property. Our vineyard saved the property. Our neighbors like Signorello and Altamira were not as fortunate. They had to go through a rebuild. But it kind of inspired Tracy and I, who were always dreaming, as I said, of having a brand someday, to have a purpose behind the brand, because we started thinking with everything that's going on in the world around sustainability, around climate, around all the things that are there, you can either take this position that says, hey, we're going to just be resilient and fight it, or you're going to say, I need to understand what can we do differently. We're asking everybody else to change. What can us do differently? And that kind of became the reason behind the name Neotempo. So Neotempo means new times. It's also a play on music. And really the reason we put the oaks, for example, on the label was to celebrate again the tradition, and they're a great symbol of survival and resilience. They've been in this valley for a long time. And then we started really researching areas that we can kind of help. And I ended up at that point focusing on this full time. So it was 3 modes. On the farming side, we were always organic. We believed very much around this notion of organic grapes taste better and they make better wine. Not everybody may agree. So bringing Phil and Sam on board was a no-brainer. In fact, I think I asked Phil for a year if he would come over, and we're a small property.
And he blew you off for a year?
Yeah, he didn't. He was very nice about it, but it was one of those things that he understood, I think, how serious we were about kind of the ethics around that. And then I leaned on what I knew, which was technology, around how do we drive technology not to replace or in place of great farming, but to help scale that. And then when we studied the carbon footprint of wine, the number one thing is packaging. And that's kind of what drove us to this bottle. I met with 18 different bottle makers. I challenged them to say, show me your lightest bottle that is durable, because if the bottles are thin and they break in shipment, we're a brand new brand with 90% DTC. That's not sustainable if you get broken packages all the time, especially in the US. In Europe, it's different because you sell through retailers and, COVs and what have you. Here, we have to deal with UPS and FedEx every day. And that's not a fun business if you have a small production.
No.
Oh, I know.
Not fun at all.
How many
Shout out to our
how many
UPS
broken
and
bottles
FedEx
do you
reps
guys
out
have?
there.
I mean, Sam.
What's that?
And Bart.
What's that?
How many broken bottles do you go through?
I have to say, I mean, I'm pounding on wood right now. Very few, if any. I can't really remember the last time. I break more bottles around the winery. I broke 2 bottles yesterday. So that's more of my problem. The shipping has been pretty good. Well, and that's using pulp, not, styrofoam.
Well, I know the Podfather at Scylla often gets a case of mashed wine from multiple.
Yeah, he showed some Instagram a few months ago of some bad deliveries.
But they just dump them on the floor, toss them in.
Well, and that's I don't want to jump the gun or the other piece of one of the other pieces. There's so much, this is probably be like a 3-parter, Kia. There's so many different
lot to unpack,
things to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's finish the bottle and then we'll move to
come back.
We'll move to the box that calls home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think part of the bottle for us was we very quickly understood, and again, being new to the wine business, and I say this out of respect. There are a lot of smart people in the business, but unfortunately, the industry relies on third parties to design bottles and packaging. And one of the things we learned in tech was system design is very important. So rather than thinking of components, you have to think about it as an end-to-end system. And you have to take a systematic approach because there are things that solve one problem but create another problem. So when I met with glass companies, they were different than the box companies. The box companies were designing boxes for every kind of glass. The glass companies were designing bottles. And nobody was like looking at this end to end around how do I, again, come with a plastic-free, no styrofoam, compostable solution that's made from recycled material all the way through. And again, part of kind of the engineering aspect of it, I enjoy. So when I see imperfect solutions, I kind of have a desire to at least test it. And then I have the tolerance for risk, which a lot of people shouldn't have. But I come from a world where 10% success rate is great, which is very different than everybody in this business. So it requires kind of a mindset that you're not randomly doing things. You're just like taking shots that are calculated and then looking at if it doesn't work. We always had a backup plan. So we prototyped this bottle on a 3D printer in my garage. We did 38 different reps. I took it to Tony one night when he had a barrel sample at a restaurant in St. Helena. I snuck it under my jacket and I said, Tony, if you laugh at me or you think this is the worst thing, like I'll stop now. And he looked at it, he played with it, and he's like, no, I think it's great. And I think that was there are a few meetings that could have gone the other way in the birth of the bottle, but so we didn't do it to stand out. We did it because we think the industry needs more R&D and innovation in this space.
Well, let's describe this bottle too.
It's
hexagonal on the top,
right? Yeah. And your thinking in the design is really important to know.
So there's form and function. So I was taught very much that when you think about design, you have to think about the form, which is how appealing is it? How does it look? How does it stand out? Does it perform well in terms of like we had a lot of Psalms that told us about pour rates of wine and those type of things.
Wait, sorry. Now you piqued my interest. Talk about that pour rates. What do you mean?
So wine pours, that the reason for the neck, a lot of people don't understand, like engineers would ask, why have a bottle that has any neck? Like the most efficient way is like a water bottle.
Right.
And the reality is the pour rate is very important for wine. That changes the aeration, natural aeration, and there's a tradition again that we want to respect. So we started out with the question of why are wine bottles round? And it comes from a historical reason. They were hand blown, but they're not anymore. So we're kind of faking it anyway in terms of that. Then we started asking the question of round is the. I
mean, that's totally fake it till you make it.
Right.
Yeah.
And now
he's made it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not here to say all of my cellar other than our wine bottles are round bottles, but we've always heard from customers or we're collectors that have that one bottle that doesn't fit the rack. So one of the things that was
Turley.
was that the bottle had to fit the wine rack. So I ended up basically getting a wine shop in Walnut Creek to act as my testing site for all the different wine racks that are sold to different customers, wine fridges to racks. And I said, okay, let's reverse engineer the dimensions of that. Then we had some people who had bottling lines. So what was very clear is we were going to fool the bottling line.
That's important, right?
It's very important. And corking machines and all of those. Yeah. So the bottle as it stands today is hexagonal on the shoulders and it's round on the bottom. And the reason for that is it fits the existing world in terms of, wine filling. And
it's called change parts.
Change parts. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's on the bottling line. Those are the pieces that you change for all the different bottles.
And we typically do that with common. So Everest Bottling is my partner on this. We have a bunch of other bottling lines that we're working with as well. But we, from inception, were able to, basically do this in an automated way, from filling to corking now to labeling. The key was on the why hex. Hexagonal shapes are the most efficient shapes in nature. You see this in honeycombs and bees.
That's six-sided for those of you back in podcast land.
Geometry podcast. But what's great about them is that we wanted to optimize for a 3-pack, a 6-pack, and a case. A 3-pack is a lay-down model, and that's actually predominant in our architecture. We actually think that laying down wine is great all the way through, keeping the cork wet. So hexagon gives you more support this way. And so it strengthens the side support. And also kind of remove some of the negative space that you have, for example, with a Burgundy bottle. So less air to ship, more wine to ship. Then I started dissecting all the old bottles. My reference bottle, which I love, again, as a homage to the past, was Dick Grace's Grace Family 1987, which is a phenomenal wine. The bottle weighs 560 grams, or 560 grams. We're 540. We're 20 grams off of that. I measured with a caliper basically all the different walls and found out that most of these heavy bottles just have excess glass that, by the way, doesn't help anybody in structure, because most wine, when it breaks in shipment, is heavy bottles banging against each other. Yeah. And that's why the box was so important. So then the box we designed was one that basically has cushioning. It's made completely out of cardboard, but it has a spring-loaded model using cardboard that the hexagon bottles snap in. But it gives an air cushion so that if they get dropped, and I think this is one of the fun things, was we did a lot of drop testing.
If anyone,
you have some videos on the website or YouTube or something.
You can go on YouTube and you can watch Kia basically try to break bottles, and finally he had to get on the roof and throw it off to
it wasn't just like drop it off the roof. It was like throwing it with force from the roof.
I did this is a fun demo we did 3 weeks ago. I did it with actual wine bottles. Those tests were done with water, but I'm at a point now that I trust the package enough to actually.
And these are all 100% recycled.
100% recycled glass. That's made by Estal, a company out of Spain. I want that technology here, and I'm a big advocate for change. Again, I want to make this point. When we set out to do this, it wasn't to just do it for Neotempo. We wanted Neotempo to be the first, be kind of patient zero. But the idea was, how do we get the industry to pay more attention to these things? Now, I have patented the bottle, and I want to be very open about this. The reason was I don't want copycats that don't have the same functionality in terms of green sustainability benefits, but like the design. So, but again, the idea by next year is we're going to start opening the licensing or open source. We're exploring different ways that we can share this with other folks.
So I have two questions. One and I guess you need the reason, but have you thought of an alternate Burgundy bottle?
Yeah.
And then two, fooling the change parts for going to the corker.
Yeah.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah.
but
labeling.
putting the label
Yeah,
on,
that label.
and especially that label.
Yeah, that label is hand applied.
Okay.
And it was on purpose.
Okay.
But our other labels are machine applied. In fact, the back label that you can see is a good example of machine applied one.
Yeah.
So yeah, the answer is yes to both. So we have a version 2 in the works right now. We're targeting 460 grams. Which is
That's
massive.
that's the
weight,
that's
the empty weight. So that will allow us to meet all the European regulations that are forthcoming. So the idea was V2 is meant to be a little bit again, and there'll be a Burgundy version that's very sexy that I can't wait to show you guys, and a Cabernet version. And we think these two designs can really kind of like accommodate majority of the wines that we make in California.
How will those new European rules affect you?
They are starting to put nobody knows because haven't been ratified around what's the penalty or is this just a guideline. But look, we need to get ahead of it. Again, this is another reasons that I think innovation allows us to bring in customers and have it be a feature as opposed to a penalty. And I'm just gonna say this, when Tesla set out to make cars, I think the approach they took was how do we build a better car that happens to be electric rather than an electric car that you feel like you gave up a bunch of things. Right. And that's the way at least we think of it. And again, I want to take the brand away for a second, but the approach of adding something as opposed to just taking things away. Look, a heavy bottle doesn't look like a heavy bottle on Instagram. We live in a visual society. The fact that you all mentioned Instagram is actually funny because
that's such a great.
That's
line.
a visual. That's what a hexagon bottle does. It stands out and it people remember it. I'm not saying that that's the only type, but I think we need more innovation in the industry around this.
And it's interesting that because you were sort of an outsider that came at it from a fresh perspective, we always, when we would hire someone new in a restaurant, we loved sitting down with them after 2 weeks and because they have a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah.
And we would say, what do you notice about things that we're doing? Because you get stuck doing the same thing every day.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have someone that would come in and say, yeah, why do you guys do this? Why do you guys do that?
Well, I'll tell you.
But you have to be open to listening to that.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I was very sensitive, just being very open that if the wine wasn't good, last thing I wanted was have our brand, after all these years that we spent time on it, become a gimmicky brand.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I thank Tony because the wine was great. I mean, we got such great.
The wine is great right now.
Yeah.
Now.
And I'm sorry if I say that openly, but we had the confidence when we did the first tasting with Antonio Galloni and he, I mean, that was an experience on its own. But on Christmas, I remember getting a call from Tony. I was in South Africa with Tracy, and he says, "Have you read what hit your email box?" And I'm like, "No." And I looked at it, and he named us the most exciting debut in 2003. And in it, he says, "This is 100% for the wine, but I like the packaging direction." And that kind of gave us the first boost of confidence. Since then, we've had Lisa and Jeb and everybody else talk about the wine, which kind of gives you that confidence that says, look, what's inside is going to be hopefully delightful. So we can go with something. And I always gave Tony the option that says, Tony, if you think this is distracting from the wine, we can wait on it. And so I think that's why I would say is like, and by the way, I met with a lot of other wineries. They had existing customers. They said, Kia, any radical change for us is huge risk, even if it's the right thing. So in some ways, we were doing the experimentation for the industry and the market and trying to see if there's a backlash. And if there was a backlash, again, we're a small brand. We can evolve and go back.
And this is not the only label you guys have.
No.
How many different wines are you guys making?
So we now have 3 wines, and there are 2 wines that are single estate, both Cabernet, using 2. Each of them uses 2 of the clones that
a different combination.
Because we wanted to show microclimates in the front and back blocks and different clones.
How big is your property?
So our property is 4 acres.
Oh my
so
God.
Very small, very tiny. But I'll talk about the reason why is that from the outset, we farmed at a vine level. And I genuinely believe that if you can do that, and again, we'll talk about the technology part of this, but when you're doing organic farming, you have to farm at a vine level. You don't have these nuclear, one size fits all solutions. So you have to get to know the vineyard and understand, the different rows. The advantage of that, because we spend so much time in there, is that when it comes to picking, you have a lot more knobs. You have a lot more ways that you can grab flavor profiles that are nuanced. So we do 4 micro picks, and that allowed us to have 2 wines that are very different but come from the same property.
Right.
Where in a kitchen sink blend, they probably would become one wine that maybe doesn't show each element.
Is it? I mean, I don't. Can you kind of describe the difference in those picks? Like, what are the goals of the 4 picks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you could see how it would make a vineyard management company and a winemaker both crazy.
Yeah. So this was one
billable hours, though. It's all billable hours.
Yeah. And look, that's part of the technology.
Sure, we can do anything you want.
Yeah, anything you want. So the idea was that we would the front and the back of the property have about 2 degrees difference. That translates to about so that's an average during the growing season in terms of GDD days and the components. On the back block, we're usually a week and a half, 10 days to 14 days behind. So in fact, 338 is affectionately known as 33 late because it's the latest, So if you have patience, what that delivers is silkiness. And 338 is in both of our wines as a component, minor component on one, major component on the other one. And it, again, brings that freshness naturally, acidity naturally. Where with the front blocks, the 412 gets plenty of sun and kind of has the classic Napa. That's the main ingredient in the wine we're drinking. The classic Napa fruit that comes in, not over extracted, very high on phenolics, so the rich color that you get. On the other one, the second wine, we get some of the earth notes from the 685 in particular, and the Rutherford dust, kind of a little bit of that earthiness that is also part of Cabernet in a very good way, that again is somewhat of a bygone era. So in a blind tasting, the second wine sometimes comes off as a Super Tuscan or something from Graves. We love that kind of element, again, of uniqueness, of not being able to see its cousins, but
Did you say Rutherford dust?
I know, yes. One of my favorite
Tell
areas.
me about this. Okay.
So Mark Neal helped us plant the original vineyard, and Jack Neal and Son, Mark's dad, and the company they run managed a lot of the Rutherford properties. He has some vineyards there. Martha's Vineyard was very famously farmed by him as well. And Mark's a great guy. We really enjoyed kind of the work we had with him all the way leading up to the fire. And then at that point, so I was introduced very much to this concept of Rutherford dust with the train going by and the dust that stays on the grapes and creates that earthy taste in the vineyard. So,
there you go.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's
a classic Napa tasting note.
Yeah.
Especially from like valley floor
Yeah,
vineyard sites.
exactly.
and it's typically caused from people driving through vineyards too fast.
Yeah.
Not just
29.
no,
Exactly.
winemakers.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, winemakers. Right. Grape growers always drive, and
Grape
vineyard
growers
guys
drive
always
slow.
drive through the vineyard slow.
Well,
no doubt.
winemakers all have these, Napa. They all have their fast cars, and they
Driving the Porsche through.
they have
or
17
the
clients to get to. They got to go fast.
Wow. Thank you for explaining that. The wine is delicious. The wine's delicious.
Wine's
Go
delicious.
ahead.
It's
We kind of distracted you. From
it's
your
a
comment.
it's a Brian Casey Cabernet. It's got so much acidity.
Yeah.
So much freshness. It stands out in the glass before you even, before you see the bottle or the label.
Yeah.
And so what is total case production off of 4 acres?
So 406 cases of this one, Kiatra Estate. Wow. We will always make 100% Cabernet, and that's why, and that's the white label with the oak, so that it's locked into that place. We also have 150 cases of Sensoria, which is our second wine brand. That one, the inaugural year, the 21, will be from, again, it's the second wine. When we did the blending, and I'm sure a lot of you can attest, the room was divided between A and B. Right. And it's the classic problem of, well, are we going to make a C that's like the mediocre version of the two? And what we ended up doing was we picked the clear A, and we had the A minus be the second wine, with the notion of this wine's too good to bulk or not to bottle. Right. And let's bring the production down on both sides and just have 2 wines that go in. I had a purpose behind that too with Sensoria. I wanted to create a different wine that's appealing to a wider audience, not just a wine audience, but the younger audience. One of the things you have to think about when you're a brand new label is who are your customers in 20 years? Right. So I had to really think about the positioning and branding with an eye towards millennials, and I know that I studied a lot of different tries and failures and frustrations. And good news with us is because our quantity is small, we're not afraid of people not buying cases. So the idea becomes, how do you kind of bring an experiential wine into the portfolio? The word sensoria comes from the part of the brain that processes different senses. So we wanted to make a wine that was for events, for food pairings, art pairings. And that's when we also started thinking about the idea of having a different artist work with us on the cover design. Right. Because in some ways, the bottle is our label. It allows us to, again, bring artwork to the label that fits the canvas, if you will. Yeah.
And how did you decide on the artwork that you currently have on there and the famous photographer?
Yeah, so it was again accidental in the sense that I was going to London to meet with Berry Brothers with a barrel sample. They're a great supporter of ours. And then at dinner, a friend of mine said, look, I have a chance for you to meet one of your heroes, photographer heroes. We're going to go to an Italian restaurant. I'm like, I'll bring the wine. And the gentleman's name is Brian Griffin. If you're into photography, he was one of the greatest photographers in the 1980s. He did album covers for everyone that, it was the original Elvis Costello photos. He did the first 5 albums for Echo and the Bunnymen and Depeche Mode. Yep. Did a bunch of stuff for Iggy Pop, and just was the coolest. I again, being at CD Research, again, I'm connecting all the dots. Oh. This was what I was exposed to on a daily basis, was all these CD covers, and they always had the same signature behind them. Yep. And so to meet him was great. The fact that he loved our wine was great. But then he took the bottle and he couldn't stop looking at it. And he says, this bottle is going to reflect light differently. And that was Brian's calling card. This is all before Photoshop and post-processing. This is all analog. And what he had done on many of those photos was outdoor and indoor lighting with shadow, almost like, think of a film noir, where you have enough shadows on the subject that it just makes it 3-dimensional. A lot of those photos are like paintings. And instantly he saw that bottle and he says, I want to photograph your bottle. I'm like, how do you say no? I'm like, you name it, whatever it takes. Yeah. And then we became friends in the studio when I happened to witness that. Then he gave me a peek into his archive. And I just remember him saying, the guys, the A&R guys at the music record labels and magazines are not exactly the smartest people, because they picked a lot of the photos based on the text that they wanted to put either the band name or the label or the
space.
article.
Where you put Rolling Stone on the cover of the magazine affects what picture you put on the cover of the magazine. Totally.
So he's like, I have hundreds of photos that I thought were actually better than the original one that they picked. And he gave me a peek at that. And that's when the idea came when saying, look, I have this great wine that you tasted that doesn't have a label. How about we do something? And he fell in love with that idea because also he liked the idea of looked at the bottle as a new medium. The hexagon bottle has a trityptic, feel. So so then he said, so we worked together on laying out the photos in a way that kind of made them interesting, three-dimensional. And so we chose 6 photos from each of the Depeche Mode shoots, an alternative photo than the original, and put those in. He named the wine Intrigue. We put his name on the back as a tribute. We did the launch in January in London at Berry Brothers, which was great, in that old 325-year-old venue of wine. For the first time, we had an art showing of all these big photographs, and it was fantastic. He was over the moon. Then the tragedy happened about a few days later, where he peacefully passed away in his sleep. And I at that point had a dilemma, Tracy and I, where we had a great project and we enjoyed his company so much, and we just pulled the plug. We just said, this is not right. I don't want to do it. Then I went back for the memorial, and when I got a chance to talk to his family, they were so they just shared with us how much the project meant to him, and we decided we're going to go ahead as a tribute to him. So we waited until his birthday. We launched the wine back on his birthday. I want to bring the prince over and with his assistant and kind of give the same thing that we did in London. Because he's a great photographer. And this is the thing, is that we all, whether you're winemakers, you're in the vineyard, you're inspired by others, whether it's musicians or photographers. They're the ones that inspire you. And so it gave us a natural way to, long answer short, it kind of give us the inspiration around it. We're not just working with Brian. We have a rosé that I'm very excited about. It's the newest kid on the block, so it's getting all the love from us. It's our first Sonoma wine that I'm very happy about as well. I know.
Sonoma?
It's crazy. One of the greatest. It comes from Stone's Throw Justy Vineyard. The fruit is Grenache that comes off of that. And it's a rosé, although I'm almost afraid of calling it a rosé because, again, part of our approach was not a cover wine. We respect a lot of what's been done. And it's kind of hard when you have a single varietal to, strike new notes, but it is different. And when people kind of taste it, I wish I had it. We're going to bottle it on the 6th. I'll be sure to bring some back here. And for that wine, we're partnering with another artist called Nick Walker. And Nick was a mentor of Banksy's. So he's like, he basically is a tagger, is a street artist. And the artwork is something that he had done during the pandemic that spoke to us.
Yeah, how did you get connected with him?
I met him in 2009 in New York off of, at a pool table, again, through a friend. And it's amazing when you...
Did you say you met him at a pool table?
Yeah, well, we're sharing, we're in a... I didn't know how good of a billiard player he was, and we're just drinking, listening to music, and I had no idea who he was. And we start talking, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm an artist," and I'm like, "What genre?" And then I was very familiar. He goes by the handle The Vandal. Mm-hmm. And he has a bowler hat and a suit as his secondary persona. And the reason for that is he used to laugh that says nobody expects a guy that's dressed in a suit and a bowler hat to be the vandal, right, but as a tongue-in-cheek reference. So, but great guy, again, very, very creative. And again,
how good was he at pool?
He was pretty good.
Did he take some money from you?
Look, he is good at many things. Again, wine and music. When you have wine and music, you make a lot of friends. I learned, as we all know.
As I sit here today.
So I called in a
thanks
favor.
To Bill Walton.
I went back again. Thanks to Bill Walton. What a great guy.
Yeah. I'm going to close with the story in our shout outs.
Fantastic. Yeah. So with Nick, the key thing on that was that we wanted to kind of celebrate love. Right now, there's a lot of kind of doom and gloom in the world, more than we deserve, maybe.
Absolutely.
And we wanted to kind of have a bright wine that just spreads love. And so it's called Sensoria Love. The image that he created was the vandal throwing a heart up in the air to symbolize love is in the air. And we just want to
we'll take a case,
bring positive vibes to everyone.
We'll take a case.
Sure. And so what is the plan moving forward with non-estate fruit?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. We're quite excited about Neotempo still being about small sites, single vineyards, but different vineyards over time. Again, the goal is to replicate kind of what Kiatra is in size and scale, but do it now. So we're excited. We're doing some projects around Moon Mountain, some projects around Oakville Ranch. The common thread there is Phil, and the fruit. Farming, the best fruit from the best farming.
So, are you attending this?
Yes,
Moon Mountain.
I can't
June
wait.
4th?
I'm so excited for it. So excited.
Excellent.
Did you attend?
How great was it?
Yeah.
This is coming out way after.
How was Sam? Did Sam do well?
Did Sam do well?
How are the 2013s? That's the real question.
Yes, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah. So besides the rosé, what's in the works?
So a Cap Franc lead blend
from
that's a little bit different from Oakville.
Okay.
That's why I can't get the Cap Franc.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Competition.
And then Moon Mountain, doing some Cabernet based stuff there.
Right.
Where are you growing it up on Moon Mountain?
So it's actually from Phil's property. So again, for us,
the nunnery, right?
Nunnery,
yeah,
exactly. Which I think is a site that has a massive future
it's a pretty amazing spot.
It's an amazing spot.
Yeah.
One of the northernmost vineyards of the Moon Mountain district, kind of a northwestern exposure, below the Lassiter's Trinity Ridge property, above basically it's the very end of
Nuns Canyon. Trinity Ridge.
It's just below,
below Trinity Ridge.
Above like the Hamels Nuns Canyon and Charlie Smith and
but like on a different Vineyard. Toe of the mountain. Like where it is.
It's more. It's like on a different, like another bench, like a bench above that.
Yeah.
And it's literally the dead end of Nuns Canyon Road, and it's sketchy. It is sketchy to get up there. There's some of these bridges that you cross over.
I jackknifed a truck up there many years ago.
Oh, it happens.
With a load of grapes.
Yeah,
didn't spill any fruit though.
Attaboy.
Good man.
That you kept that job.
Right, that's exactly right.
Well, and
because that fruit was expensive then.
Yeah.
That's nice that you have Tony also working with the fruit, because he's familiar with Phil, and they probably have a good working relationship.
Absolutely. And I think, the thing about Tony, a little bit of plug, I already said how good his musical taste is. He's very flexible. He knows how to work with different parts. I find sometimes that if you get too familiar to one spot, you try to make fruit that matches whatever the signature is. And one of the things I love about Tony Biaggi Wines is that they loudly speak of the place. There is definitely precision, which is kind of, I think, a hallmark of his winemaking, around like tannin management, etc. But he doesn't overwhelm the site. Right. And for our project, this was important because, again, we want each of the wines to have their own personality.
For sure.
As opposed to having a Neotempo taste that
right.
is, because life again becomes boring.
Right.
And I like uniqueness. I think we're all individuals. We should live our lives differently. There's greatness in everything if you can kind of take the time to find it in some ways.
Right.
And again, a lot of problems that I see in society and our industry comes from this massive scale thing. I used to hate going to parties in Silicon Valley where the first question people ask you is what company you work for and try to do the market cap analysis.
Right.
I hate the discussions here where the first question people ask you is how many acres do you have or how many cases do you produce?
Right.
I think it's irrelevant. There are people making really good wines out of small lots and making great wines out of big lots.
Well, yeah. I mean,
and those are two different sports.
Right.
And they're both important
right.
for our industry.
And there's probably more not very good wines made out of large amounts than the opposite, right?
Yeah, and when the market's going through what it's going through, the bigger you are, the harder it is to keep everything going.
Right.
And I think that's the part of our industry that, I think it's healthy for us to have small growers, smaller projects, and bigger projects, and kind of have a balance, as opposed to all the chips are into 5 companies. And if somehow beer sells more than wine, it's going to impact the rest of the industry.
Right. And just to be clear, the reason I asked about case production and acreage was because I want to know if we can actually buy these wines.
No, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And yes, the answer is yes. We do have wine available, and we're always one of the things I did on that front, and great advice I got from Graham McDonald and Alex, was we limited the wines to only 6 bottles. Nobody has more than
future podcast guests.
Yeah, they're great.
Wait, say that again. So if you have like a traditional wine club, or people sign up with a membership, or they get access or allocation to the wines
are restricted, even those are, because I don't want to give. I respect people who've been with us since the founding. We have a lot of repeat customer. I don't mind selling wine to someone 3 times in a year.
Right.
What I don't want is for somebody, and unfortunately this comes from my old world, people showing up and saying, I'll buy a barrel, or I'll buy 10 cases. That kind of doesn't give us lifeblood. What we want is lots of customers over time that discover the wine. And again, part of what's wrong with the industry is I think you have a ton of people who buy this stuff, put it in a vault
trophy.
They don't. It's not even a trophy on the wall. It's in some
in the spreadsheet and seller tracker account.
And how do you grow? How do you grow? So we tell people, if you open our wine with some friends, let us know. Send us some pictures. We'll take care of you. We'll add to your allocation. But nobody gets more than a small set.
And I think you said 80 or 90% was DTC.
It was 90%. Now it's 80%, probably, just because we're getting demand, and it's
So that other percentage is going to a distributor in California or a national?
No, it's international. Actually, funny enough, we have Berry Brothers out of the UK that's doing great for us. Zanzibar out of Germany that's doing great for us. We have New Jersey and New York. We do direct to consumer in California. And what's great is for all our Northern California customers, Tracy or I delivered the wine. So we get to meet the people. We believe in that. In startups, you learn this term founder-led sales. And VCs don't like founders to hire VPs of sales too early, because that's when you know whether your product's working or not. So it's been great for us to get that feedback directly, understand what kind of food they like, and are they vegetarians, or they like steak, or, so that's kind of, again, advantages with a small quantity that you can't have if you're selling 1,000 cases right out of the gate. You're kind of in this channel, and you're competing with 50 other wines, and you don't truly get the what's good and not good.
And do you have a tasting room where people can come and try the wine?
Right now we don't, but actually I take that back. We're working with Monica Stevens at All Access, and you can taste Neotempo wines at All Access.
And where is that? Just in case
that's
people
in St. Helena.
Okay.
And in town we're also at V Wine Cellars. That's our kind of local wine shop. And we're at the French Laundry. We're at a few other places, restaurants that nearby, and we're working on we want to be very inclusive. Again, we pour regularly at a lot of the events. So that's basically how we want to be accessible. This is not about we're sold out and all the BS that happens sometimes. But it is hard because it's just me and Tracy right now.
Yeah.
So.
Kia, you just mentioned St. Helena, and I wanted to shift a little bit to growing.
Yeah.
Because you talk on your website about how daytime temperatures can average 10 degrees cooler than St. Helena, which is just up the road.
Yeah.
So why is it this perfect environment? What is it geologically?
I hate to say it, but it's the global warming, unfortunately, has made areas that were not suitable for Cabernet almost more suitable than the areas that were prime. And unfortunately, global warming is not like just everything gets warm. You have all these unpredictable things that are happening that are extremes, both on cold and hot. But our area, which is Lower Stag's Leap, the temperatures match what Rutherford was or Oakville was 10 years ago. Right. Now, that's not good in 20 years, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. But right now, one of the things that I can tell you is that we're picking at optimal phenolic maturity. We're not seeing raisoning. We're not seeing the prune, so it's very tough if you're in Calistoga and you're growing Cabernet with the traditional clones, because you pick your poison, right? You either have to pick early and deal with that, or if you let it hang, there could be flavors that come in. And I never want to generalize like I just did, because there are obviously clonal differences, microsites. Each of the nook and valleys are different. But our site has been really good during years of heat, and I'm super excited about 22. I don't know if anybody on your podcast will ever say this, but I'm super, super excited about our 22. I tasted it and I'm super excited about it.
Oh, what is getting bottled this year?
Yeah, it's getting bottled in a couple of months. And on that, Sam, and I think this is something that, again, kudos to the farming side. When we had the two extreme heat days, 117 and 119 at us, we irrigated like crazy 7 hours before. I had brought in this technology from Israel called Phytech that helps us monitor the stress of the vines. And we lucked out. We lost 3% of the fruit, not 25% like our neighbors. Yeah. It bailed us out. I mean, I tell that because I think these are the meaningful ways where technology can help us battle.
Sam, do you have the same fruit loss from those heat sparks?
It was site specific.
Site specific.
Yeah.
My neighbors were at 20%, some of them. And again, what made it worse that year was then we had rain. Right. So you had to kind of people panic picked, and we thinned it out and let the grapes dry out.
Let it hang out, yeah.
Know your grower. It's all about knowing your grower.
Yeah.
All right, so we've made it like an hour and 15 minutes, and we haven't talked about Scout at all, which I want to talk about. But the coolest thing, and Scout is amazing for our listeners who are both people who make and sell wine and receive wine packages, is that little thing that's sitting right over there, which is the box that phones home. You just give this is cool. This thing is so cool.
So again, when we were looking at, so every year I try to take on one or two things that are new, that need testing, and I don't go into them saying, oh, it's going to work. I go into them and saying, this has potential. Does it work or not? One of the problems that I saw is our many delivery companies kind of push us towards next day air, which is both expensive, and I didn't know if shipping by air is actually any better for the wine.
That's exactly right. And it's even bigger carbon footprint,
worse carbon footprint.
Yeah, the worst, right?
So I bought a few of these sensors to put into our packages for testing. And the sensors are such that they report back every 30 seconds where location, temperature, light, etc. And we had a complete data-rich set of data around all the different transports and all the different pieces.
What's the worst you saw in mishandling?
Well, I'll tell you that this is actually two stories that are hilarious. They'll both have an American happy ending, but could have been headed towards tragedy. One was a friend of ours who's a nurse, who we had 4 delivery attempts, And on the fourth one, I was just telling her, look, whatever you do, I want to get this wine to you and she's on shifts. She can't stay home. She has to go save
the
lives.
Nurses and the hospital employees, hardest people to deliver wine to all the time.
And the beauty was this sensor allowed us to tell her exactly where the truck is that's delivering the box so that she could literally go home and come back within an hour during her break.
Yeah, I mean, just to relate this, I just before I got here, I was dealing with this. That a customer had their wine delivered. They missed them the first time because they were told the wrong time.
Yep.
They made alternate and said, we'll be here. They said it will be here between time A and time B. They were home, didn't show up, and now it's having to go and be stored at a UPS facility for them to go pick up on their own, as opposed to
isn't always next to their house. I just dealt with this last week, someone where it was over an hour away. And so we're going to end up sending her more wine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm going back to saying technology can solve this. These trackers right now are about $50, but they're multi-use. We put an envelope so they return them back. The target architecture will go to $9 in the future. And eventually it'll be just part of the cardboard.
Yeah.
And we had a very successful pilot. We did about 350 shipments. Zero breakage, zero returns. The other story I was going to tell you was a person who saw the signature for the package, but she's like, I didn't sign for this and I don't know who this is. And then we found the package. She didn't know there was a mailbox room in her gated community where they would sign for packages. So that was actually a lot of fun when we directed it to where it was.
I thought you were going to say it was the neighbor that signed for it. They were drinking it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
the wine was great. You really there's weird card in it though. I threw it to my dog. No, let's sort of set the scene on this thing. It's a little bit larger than an iPhone.
Yep.
Probably thinner, probably about a quarter inch thick.
Yep.
Doesn't weigh very much. Has an on-off button and your logo on it, basically.
Yeah,
and maybe some flashing lights if it's on, right?
Yeah. And so what's in this thing is, think of it as an AirTag, but it has a full SIM card. So it calls home on a 5G LTE network with the location, temperature, shock, and sensor. This technology was invented for vaccines.
How hot have you seen it?
So 3 years ago, when we're trying to send vaccines as quickly as we could to all the different parts of the world, this was the technology that would alert you if the vaccines were spoiled.
Right.
And I look at our business, especially if you're shipping wine, especially on our first vintage, like I couldn't afford a single customer not getting it in a good condition. It literally would destroy our business. So we leaned in heavy on it. We're now working with the vendors on this to come to our industry and scale it. So part of it is the software. What the software that we built does is notifies the customer that, hey, your package is about to leave the warehouse. Are you okay with being home, or are you on vacation? Tie that into Commerce 7 or whatever your CRM tool is. And then basically alert the customer on where it is. And then something we came up with, we have our own standard of what we deem acceptable in terms of temperatures.
Sure.
And then we give them a checkbox saying it met all of our standards. So that rather than, because I know a lot of your clients might wonder, well, with a difficult customer, aren't we giving them more reasons to reject the package? We found the opposite. The data comes to us. We basically run the rule. When it passes all the checks, we know that at that point, the chain of custody has successfully delivered the wine. If it doesn't meet the rules, then we go back to our carrier and have data for insurance. We have data for the replacement part.
And which carriers are the best?
Okay, so I don't want to. I will share
all of them because they're listening. They're all the best.
So that's exactly my view. Is look, the data showed us what routes are best for different carriers, if that makes sense. So, and that was the value. We actually did the first pass with everyone: GLS, UPS, FedEx. We sent the same package to the same address through two different carriers, so we could do A/B tests.
And what?
So I'm a data nerd.
What's the data tell you though on that?
Well, so, and again, I got to be careful because this was done in the fall. We ran the third pilot post Thanksgiving. We found that first day air or overnight air makes no sense. 3-day air performed the best. So UPS has a 3-day shipment that if you get your act together and ship on Monday, it can get Florida by Friday. And it's a third of the cost of overnight. Right. And again, if you're selling Cabernet, it's not pop and pour. Most people are not ordering it so that they can open it. Right. So if you're wondering what funds all of this, my view is like the waste funds innovation. Same thing with the bottle. Our bottle is cheaper than a heavy bottle. It's cheaper per unit.
Right.
Like
sure.
What funds?
Like it should be.
Like it should be. So what's happened is unfortunately, a lot of the industries that support us are looking after their shareholders first, and they're not looking after our customers' wallets and our wallets.
That's why I was going to ask if UPS, FedEx, GLS would be interested in the data that you're creating, but maybe not.
It's third-party verification. Now, what I can tell you, and this is a good compliment.
Insurance companies are, though.
Their the air was not an issue on any of their warehouses. So 65 degrees, 70 degrees consistently. Now, we'll do this in the summer again. So, maybe for a next podcast, I'll have a different view. Yeah. But we were able to not use any styrofoam in any of our shipments and just do cardboard because we had the data and the confidence. And I think over time, as we get more and more data, the software can tell you what are the best windows for delivery based on temperature. And see, this is what I mean around the technology being smart, is eventually it needs to tell us when we should ship to get the least amount of.
Yeah. And so is this something that you're offering are all your customers going to get this in your mind, or is it something that you're offer to?
Yeah, it's fantastic. So what we did in our latest release was we took off the air shipping option, period. And if somebody wants that, they could buy it through retail and have them airship. But it goes on my carbon accounting.
Yeah. Right.
But we offered this as the premium option. So it's $15 more for a 3-pack shipment for you to have a monitored shipment. And I think 90% of people chose it.
Wow.
I mean, that's the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The least carbon intensive footprint with knowledge of its safety. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, it's this giant black hole.
Yeah.
Like, wine that goes out and then comes back.
Yeah. It's horrible.
We don't, you can't resell it. You can't send it again. It's like, you have no idea what happened to those wines in the 2 or 3 weeks that it was gone.
Right.
This solves all that. Like, when it lands,
where it was.
that it is intact product,
and whose fault it was.
Right.
That's the key thing. Having the data at 30 seconds means you literally can go down to this part of the route on this truck was where we were exposed. And look, I don't want to be also crazy because our cars heat up at 80 degrees and we move wine around, right? But it's the long-term exposure. Right. So a lot of people feel that going with through Memphis on airplanes is good. Well, unless if it sits on the tarmac for 6 hours, because the tarmac in Memphis during the summer is not ideal for wine.
It's like the idea of this cold chain shipping, which we can offer. It's great to get to the hub, but it's between the hub.
It still
has that time. And,
And my view is if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about.
Right.
And that's the attitude we have to take. I mean, with data, same thing with, Phil and Sam and crew is Scout, which we'll talk about a little bit more, just gives you data to help you become better. It's not a big brother spying on you. I mean, the frictions that exist in our business. See, our business right now as an industry is so sub-optimized because insurance is too much and too hard to get because they can't verify fraud. They can't verify false claims. The shipping companies treat us just like any other good that they ship. And, the guy that's delivering the package doesn't know it's a breakable, half the time. And so
or sees that it is and uses that as
or kicks it. That's why I did the drop
target.
testing. I know people don't believe me, but like I wanted to take the worst case of a shipping accident or somebody dropping a package off of the truck.
No, I used to live in a court, and I would watch some of the deliveries, and it was like you were doing.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
On the video.
Yeah.
I love the interactivity of it, though. I love that the customer is kind of like feels a part of the process
100%.
of the delivery. That's something that
it just takes all the mystery out.
Yeah, I can't wait to show you the messages I got back with the sensor coming back.
Yeah.
A couple of them were, can you come and talk to my entire team around customer service? And look, this is coming back from, again, a good place in. We take care of our clients when they come to us, to the tasting rooms, better than anybody. This is a hospitality first. This is an industry that gets hospitality. But when it comes to the goods being shipped, we don't have that control. And so part of this was get some of that control back and give people that we care, we really care, back into it. So
it's awesome. It's really awesome.
I don't want to turn Scout into, we have like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn Scout into a 5-minute conversation. So will you agree to just come back?
Of course.
We'll do a whole Scout episode.
Why don't I bring Mason?
Exactly.
And then we'll do a duel on Scout.
Yeah. Can you at least tease it?
Tease Scout.
So Scout is, so we all know that to make great wines, it starts in the vineyard, and it starts with having the farmer's intuition and experience that many growers have. But as we know, with climate and the challenges that are upon us with labor costs, et cetera, crop evaluation is a massive, massive problem. I've never met someone who said, I'm great at yield estimates. I'm great at, basically understanding where I have disease, rather than just spending thousands of dollars in labs. Over the last 11 years, owning a vineyard and being very hands-on on the financial operation of a small vineyard, it dawned on me that there's a lot of opportunities for data to make data-driven decisions that result in better margins, better quality, and better yields. That's how the concept of Scout came to be for the last 5 years. Including when Sam and company came to our vineyard. We used to walk the vineyard vine by vine, scoring each vine on a spreadsheet. Then I met my co-founder, who's a professor at Davis, and for 4 years he had this research in the lab of using GoPros and cameras and AI to analyze each vine. We joined forces and we said, how about we go after vine grapes, not all crops, build a crop-specific solution, software solution that scans the vineyard, each individual vine at a block, hundreds of acres, and quickly tells you these vines are weak, these vines are strong, these vines grew this much week after week, and helps get better yield estimates out.
Oh, you have weak vines, weak canopies, weak fruit.
And done with the
revenue
use of an
per
iPhone,
vine,
right?
All done with a phone as the brain,
right?
And the cameras that are attached to ATVs and tractors as you're doing normal work.
Unreal.
Right.
It's amazing, and it definitely, like I said, it warrants its own episode.
Yeah,
definitely, for sure.
So
definitely
3.8 pounds yield per vine.
Yeah,
$1.41 revenue.
You're ruining the tease here, man.
I am customer zero on that as well. So it was very important for me before we even talked about Scout publicly that I knew how what the challenges are, because again, I understand in this space, and I bought a bunch of technology in this space that has promised the world and under-delivered. And we're very cognizant of this. Very cognizant of this. That's why we just want to invest in innovation and have solutions. It's not forced on anyone, but we need that change. I wonder what would happen if you implemented this across all of enterprise.
You're going to have to wait till the next episode to find out.
Excellent.
Yeah. Great tease.
All right.
How do we find Neotempo online, Instagram, social media?
Absolutely.
Following you is a great follow. LinkedIn's a great follow for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Neotempo.wine is our website. Our Instagram handle is the same, Neotempo Wines. And we try to, on Instagram, be a little bit different. It's my creative outlet. So I apologize if you follow us and you're like, is this a wine brand or is this like a music brand?
Do you do the website also?
Yeah, so it's www.neotempo.wine. And yes, it is. We try to blend very authentic. Again, one thing I'm very proud of is we have a lot of talented individual artists that do photography or do content creation, but we don't have a marketing agency. Every article that's written about us is earned. I believe in that. Again, that this is how I would advise any of my startups is don't waste your money on marketing. Create a product and a story that's compelling, and there's enough people out there that want to create it. And we're humble. I mean, that's the key thing is we love, to this day, a lot of other people's wines as much or if not more than ours.
I think you have 16600 to pick up, speaking of which.
Yes, I do, which is one of my favorites, by the way, especially the rosé. Amazing. Thank you.
Sam, you had a shout out about Bill Walton.
Yeah, so this is for recording the week that Bill Walton died, and I immersed myself in Walton-ness over the past 3 or 4 days. Podcasts and videos. My social media is basically 100% Walton at this point. And it's listening, so I'll get more. He told a story at some point in some interview about being at a Dead show, and some like wild-eyed guy comes walking up towards him who's wearing this amazing shirt that was like the graphical history of the Grateful Dead, and he tells the guy, "Oh man, that's a great shirt." And the guy rips the shirt off of his back and hands it to Bill, who then puts it on, and for the rest of the night everybody's telling him that how great of a shirt he has. And so after the show, he's leaving with the band. They're being like shuttled through the security line, rope line kind of thing. People are trying to high five and hug, and he sees this guy still shirtless after the whole show standing in this rope line, and he like literally grab, Bill Walton's 7'1", 7'2", grabs him by the neck, pulls him over the barricade, and puts him on the van with the band and the entourage going back to the hotel to party. That guy was Dick Lotfalla.
Dick's Picks?
Dick's Picks,
yeah.
Who was in a commune with my mom and was friends with my mom. And when my mom started dating Phil, he's the one who introduced my dad to Walton, to the band, to Bill Kreitzman, Dan Healy. And so I had this like realization, all of this 16600 and maybe some part of Phil's life, we basically, we owe it to Bill Walton. There's like a little piece of our origin story that goes back to Bill Walton on a rope line, grabbing, shirtless Dick Lotfalla and throwing him on the van. It was nice when we got to take a picture with him.
He's got some
last
great
summer,
stories, man.
and
great stories. And that photo in your office
photo.
is
So
excellent.
the short story on that photo is my wife's neighbor in LA is Red Auerbach's daughter, Randy.
Yeah.
And we always wanted to get a picture of Alice and Walton at one of these shows to send to Randy. Mm-hmm. So at set break at that show, I tried to say that to him as he was walking out, and he's like, kind of gave me a little brush off, and I was like, all right, whatever. And then he comes back out, and I walked up to him again with Phil this time, and he goes, this fucking guy, he goes, "Oh, well, why didn't you just tell me you were Phil's son? Whatever Phil wants, Phil gets." I was like, all right, the infinite wisdom of Bill Walton. Yeah, so there you go.
He's got a lot of great stories.
Cheers to Walton.
Bill Walton.
Yeah.
Cheers.
For sure.
Anybody have any idea how he passed away?
Cancer, they said. Yeah. Very, very private. Because he was doing basketball games in like February and March.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
I know, Sam, you listen to the same radio station I do,
yeah,
and sports radio, and I love this morning how someone said that he had figured life out at a very young age.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Basketball, dead shows, and marijuana.
Yeah. Totally. Very true.
Is it wrong? Any other shout outs? Brian.
Who knows?
I think that's good.
How's the tasting?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
All good?
Yeah, mine can all hold.
Excellent.
Thanks,
all right.
Kia.
Thank you.
Kia,
Yeah, thank you, Kia,
very much.
Wine's great.
Thank you,
I
guys.
can't wait to hear the rest of the story.
Thank you very much.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you
End of
next
episode
week.
1.
There you go.